We just returned from an aerial tour of the hardest hit areas of the metropolitan region with our federal partners and local and federal officials. We were joined this morning, in addition to the governor, by Senator Charles Schumer, by Senator Gillibrand, from the federal administrative side, by Colonel Paul Owen, the commander of the New York District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Jonathan McDade, the division administrator for United States Department of Transportation, Mike Byrne, the federal coordinating officer for FEMA, joined us today. Thank you, Mike. From the state, Joe Lhota, chairman of the MTA, Major General Patrick Murphy of the Division of Military and Naval Affairs. We were joined with our local official partners. Rob Astorino, Westchester County executive, is with us. John Bruckbauer, the Commissioner of Operations for the Nassau County Office of Emergency Management, and Regina Calcaterra, Chief Deputy County Executive for Suffolk County. And also joining us today is Joe Bruno from the City of New York. We'll hear from the governor this morning, and then the senators, and then we'll be glad to take your questions, and also County Executive Astorino.
Great. Thank you very much, Howard. We did, as you heard, we just completed a helicopter tour of the region. Breezy Point, Long Beach. We went out on the southern shore of Long Island, Fire Island. We then went across to the northern part of the island to Westchester, where County Executive Astorino was pointing out some of the sites in Westchester County. We then came down, looked at the tracks on the western side of the island, of the county, coming down the Hudson River. First, I once again want to congratulate all the first responders who are still out there and still doing a magnificent job under difficult circumstances. We should all be very proud. Second, I want to thank the elected officials who have really performed admirably. County Executive Astorino and what he's done in Westchester County, County Executive Ballone in Suffolk County, County Executive Ed Mangano, Mayor Bloomberg and his team. They've really been extraordinary, and I believe this situation would have been much, much worse were it not for the outstanding local leadership that we have, and I want to thank them. Our function now is to come up with a coordinated plan for the region, one that coordinates the assets and the best resources of the federal government, state government, and the local governments, New York City, and the county governments, to make sure we are all being deployed as effectively as possible. And that's part of the function of today, to come up with a real reconstruction and recovery plan, long-term plan that coordinates all the assets. Particular thanks to our partners in the federal government, President Obama, starting with President Obama, who has been on top of this situation. He's been very informed. I've spoken to him several times myself. He wants to know what New York needs. He's been all over it. FEMA has been fantastic and responsive. As someone who was formerly in the federal government and worked in these types of situations, I have total respect for the job that FEMA is doing, and I want to thank them very much, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers. As you all know, one of the major problems still is the water in the tunnels. The water has receded, so when you drive around it looks like most of the water is gone, but the water filled the subway tunnels in many places, filled the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, and when the water fills the tunnels, that means Con Edison has issues because much of Con Ed's equipment is in the tunnels. So getting the water out of the tunnels is probably one of the main orders of business right now, and the Army Corps of Engineers is very helpful in doing that. Let me give you two updates. First, a transportation update. As you know, the New York City buses are at full service today. Thank you, Mr. Joe Lhota and your extraordinary team. There will be limited commuter rail service on Metro North and on the Long Island Railroad, which will begin 2 p.m. today, okay? Limited commuter rail service on Metro North and the LIRR will begin 2 p.m. today. and limited New York City subway service, supplemented by a bus bridge, which Joe Lhota can give you more details on, from Brooklyn to Manhattan, will begin tomorrow. One more time, limited New York City subway service, supplemented by a bus bridge from Brooklyn to Manhattan, will begin tomorrow. There'll be no service in Manhattan below 34th Street because there's no power for that service below 34th Street. 3 of the 7 East River tunnels have been pumped and are now free of water, so that's good news. There will be more service literally on a day-by-day basis as the MTA is working through this. And once again, I've had the good fortune of working closely with the MTA team, and Joe Lhota and his team really have done magnificent service, and we thank them all very much. New Yorkers have been great all through this. We're going to need some patience and some tolerance. Traffic is very difficult for 2 reasons. We still have some passings that are closed. Midtown Tunnel is still closed, etc. So there's a high volume of traffic in the city itself. Many of the traffic lights are still out, so there's a certain amount of confusion at the intersections. In terms of power restoration, we are working very hard. That is going to be a situation that is also going to be developing on a day-to-day basis. Con Ed has been giving updates. The Westchester companies on Long Island, where we have probably the greatest challenge from a power point of view, we have the New York State Power Authority that is deploying upstate utility workers to the downstate area to help out Manhattan, the Island, and Westchester. And as of now, we have 1,800 utility workers who will be coming into the downstate area as we speak, primarily from upstate New York, coming to help their neighbors in downstate New York. So we applaud NYPA, and we thank those utility workers very much. But that is going to be still a day-by-day situation until we know how much power will be restored when. So patience and tolerance on the traffic conditions and on the power restoration conditions. I can assure you everyone is doing everything they can. They're all working very, very hard. But these are significant challenges that we're facing and problems in many cases that we've never experienced before or not in a generation. So patience and tolerance would be appreciated. With that, let me turn it over to New York's senior senator, Senator Chuck Schumer.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you and your entire team for the great job that you have done, as well as our county executives. I've been speaking to all of them. Rob Astorino, who's here, County Executives Mangano and Ballone from Nassau and Suffolk County, and of course Mayor Bloomberg has done a terrific job as well, as has his team. And so I want to thank everyone for being here. The storm is receded. We can see some blue sky today, but the wreckage remains. All you have to do is tour the city, as I've been doing the last few days, tour the state. It's devastating. And there are always vignettes. To go to Rockaway and see all the burnt-out buildings. When you thought this was a storm of water and wind, it becomes a terrible fire, inferno of fire. Terrible. And it looks like the pictures of London or even Dresden after World War II, with almost nothing standing. Last night I had to drive into Lower Manhattan. It's eerie to see all the lights out. No street lights, no traffic lights, and no glows from any of the apartment building windows. Everyone's gone. The kind of thing we feared after 9/11, that Lower Manhattan would become a ghost town, is happening for a few days, fortunately, only a few days here, because the electricity is not on. And then to see so much, to see the tanker in Staten Island and the oil spill pouring out into the harbor, to see so many homes damaged. And I fear the sort of hidden danger here is so many homes are damaged. So much people's property is damaged, cars and furniture and everything else. And we haven't begun to see that. When you take a helicopter tour, which the governor graciously took us on today, you can't really see that. The houses are standing. They look fine. But if their basement or first floor is flooded, awful. And then, of course, different institutions. I've been speaking to the heads of NYU, and the damage they have is enormous, and we're going to have special efforts to help them everywhere you look. So there's tremendous damage, but today's a day where we begin to pivot from rescue and assessment to recovery and rebuilding. We have to rebuild, and as New York always does, we'll rebuild better than we were before. And the federal government has to play a major role in that rebuilding. And Senator Gillibrand and I, as well as our colleagues in the other northeastern states that were hit by this storm, are very well aware of that. And we can assure New Yorkers, we can assure elected officials as well as the citizenry of New York, that the federal government will be on the ground helping put its significant resources behind the recovery efforts. The President has told the agencies, the Army Corps, FEMA, they can attest to that. All systems go. Don't let anything get in the way of helping out New York. And that is terrific. He's made a disaster declaration. He said that we're not going to go through the usual rigmarole and wait weeks or days, not just for the disaster declaration, but for the reimbursement that has to come. We would remind people they have to document the damage they face. Don't just throw out a couch that's all waterlogged. If you're going to apply for FEMA funds, get a picture of it, get a record of it. And that's very important for people right now to begin keeping records of these kinds of things. But the federal government will help local governments from hamlets in the Hudson Valley to towns in Long Island to rebuild infrastructure. The federal program is very generous. A minimum of 75% reimbursement is asked for, but we are going to fight in major disasters. The number can be 90% or higher. That's federal reimbursement. And today, we're asking the federal government to do just that, to go for the 90% number or even higher, which they have done in the past. When there's a storm of this huge magnitude, 25% doesn't seem that much, but when you're talking about billions and billions of dollars, and you're talking not just about large entities of New York City, but smaller counties and towns and villages, the 90% is what's called for, and we are asking that. And, you know, there will be some in Washington who say we shouldn't do this, but this nation has had a grand tradition in the wake of natural disaster or an act of terrorism of coming together. The nation came together after 9/11. I was heavily involved in bringing back $20 billion to New York, and everyone united. And we expect the same unity now. The FEMA fund right now has quite a bit of money in it. It has about $7.2 billion, which is a lot. But we'll have to see what the damage assessments are. It may not be enough. And we expect everybody, Democrats, Republicans, people from every part of the country to rally by our side. And I'm sure this is the same with Senator Gillibrand. I've gotten calls from many, many of my colleagues, both Democrats and Republicans, saying, we feel your pain, how can we help? So at least the initial signs are that the country will not make this a political football, but rather give the help that the entire Northeast needs. We also will have federal engineers and law enforcement and building crews and recovery experts. Right now their boots are on the ground from the southern tip of Staten Island to the eastern tip of Long Island. They're not going to leave till the job is done. And we also know that there's help for small businesses and homeowners. For small businesses, up to $2 million for losses, not just property damage, but for instance, if you're a supermarket and your refrigerator went out because you don't have electricity, you can get reimbursement for the goods that are lost, and to homeowners for up to $31,400 the amount is for damage to their homes and to their property. That's after your insurance and your flood insurance, should you have it. Bottom line, this is one of the biggest disasters to have ever struck this state and even this country. The federal response has to measure that scope and be equal to that scope. We cannot cut corners. We cannot count nickels and dimes. This isn't just a New York disaster, a Connecticut disaster, a Jersey disaster. It is a national disaster. It needs to be treated that way by every member of Congress, by all the members of the executive branch, and it'll be my job, Senator Gillibrand's job, and the New York delegation's job, working with our colleagues in the Northeast to make sure that happens. With that, I want to turn it over to my colleague in government, who's been a great partner, a hard worker, and somebody who puts New York first above all when she's in Washington, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Thank you, Chuck. I want to thank Governor Cuomo for his outstanding leadership during this disaster. He's handled this with great leadership and great strength, and I want to thank him for that. I want to recognize and thank Mayor Bloomberg as well for the outstanding work he's done to protect the families of New York City. I also want to thank President Obama and FEMA's immediate response. I think it's important that the federal government has taken an approach that there'll be no red tape with regard to how we respond in this disaster. So having the local, state, and federal leadership all working in unison will really make a difference for our families. And I just want to echo what the governor and Senator Schumer said. The devastation is tremendous. I can tell you Breezy Point is absolutely devastated. The amount of homes that are flooded, the amount of families who are not able to return to their homes, the amount of families who have lost all their belongings is something we've really never seen before. And so I will work very hard with our state leaders and our federal leaders to make sure we have the resources to protect these families, get businesses back up and running, and make sure we can begin to rebuild. I also want to commend our National Guard and our Army Corps of Engineers and all of our first responders who have been on the ground during the storm, the immediate aftermath, saving those families that needed rescue. I can thank them from the bottom of my heart for their work. But I do have complete confidence that we will rebuild the state, we will rebuild our communities, we will help each and every family rebuild what they've lost. Thank you.
With that, County Executive Rob Astorino, Westchester County. Thank you very much, County Executive, for your leadership all through this, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Governor. And let me extend warm gratitude, personally and from the county, to the Governor for his leadership during this time, for his accessibility, and for his cooperation. You know, we have been told during this whole time, whatever you need, just tell us, and that's important as we try to rebuild. Same thing with Senator Schumer, Senator Gillibrand, our congressional delegation we've been in constant contact with. We're working with FEMA. Right now, the President has not declared Westchester a disaster area, but I think we will, by all accounts, meet that threshold very soon. And so we are working with the federal government to compile all of the information that would get us to that point, and it's going to be pretty easy to do so. This was a deadly, devastating storm for Westchester. We had 3 people that were killed during the storm, including, as you know, 2 young boys. We have massive trees and debris all over the county. We have, at the peak, 230,000 customers of Con Ed and NYC that are without electricity. Almost every single customer of NYC, which is the northeastern part of Westchester County, are completely in the dark. Con Ed and NYC, we are meeting with their representatives and the CEOs again today. The biggest frustration I think that most of the municipalities have is their DPW crews are ready, but we cannot clear some of the big trees off the roads if wires are on them. And so we have to have the utilities with us to kill the power or to certify that the power is dead so we can get out there so we don't have any injuries. Schools have been closed for 3 days. It's probable that some schools will be closed through the rest of the week. Some schools will be able to open. We keep getting calls today from parents about Halloween. And you know, I have 3 little kids too, and our neighborhood's without power. And I think for parents, it's to be parents. You know, if you're in a neighborhood that has power and it's safe, then use your own judgment. But if you're in a neighborhood, as many are, that are dark and that have down wires and debris, it would probably be best to not go outside. You know, but that's an adult decision, and adults are going to have to be adults during this time. I was amazed as we took the helicopter tour at some of the devastation along the coastline, Breezy Point, Long Beach, Fire Island, and then we came across into Westchester, and we had seen at Playland the entire boardwalk and the pier is basically destroyed. The ice casino at Playland had tremendous damage in it, where water and fish and sand were on the ice rink. And so along the coast of the Sound, we had communities that bore the brunt of it. We were fortunate that we didn't have a lot of flooding issues, but we just had some very, very heavy winds that took down a lot of trees. So I thank the state for all their help. I certainly thank our federal officials as well, and we'll be working with them in the coming days to make sure that we qualify for disaster aid. Thank you.
Thank you very much, County Executive. And I think we all agree that this has been a very difficult period for this state. But we've, as New Yorkers, we've gone through dark times before, and we know struggles and we know crisis. And we come back, and we come back even stronger. We work together. We work as a team. We work coordinated. And the challenge here for us is not just to build back, but to build back better than before. And we're going to do that. We're going to learn from this. I believe we can improve the city and the state from this, and that's our goal, and we are all committed to that. So I want to thank my colleagues very much for being here today. Questions? Zach? Zach, short answer is yes. There's a longer answer, which is a conversation for another day. I think when I say talk about we have to learn from this, I think given the frequency of these extreme weather situations that we've had, and I believe it's an increasing frequency, for us to sit here today and say, well, this is once in a generation and it's not going to happen again, I think would be short-sighted. And I think we need to anticipate more of these extreme weather type situations in the future. And we have to take that into consideration in reforming, modifying our infrastructure, our built environment. This city, this region, is very susceptible to coastal flooding. It's not something that we've had to deal with historically with any frequency whatsoever. So we're not built in a way that has the built-in protections. Other parts of the country live with flooding, live with flooding of rivers or coastal flooding, and they design their space that way. We've not done that. I think it's a longer conversation, but I think part of learning from this is the recognition that climate change is a reality, extreme weather is a reality. It is a reality that we are vulnerable. And if we're going to do our job as elected officials, we're going to need to think about how to redesign, or as we go forward, make the modifications necessary so we don't incur this type of damage. You know, the tunnels, once the water is over the banks, and I was out there that night, and the Hudson River was intent on meeting the East River, and it was coming right across Manhattan. It fills all the infrastructure we have in this city, all this great infrastructure, which is below ground. In many cases, it was an engineering marvel that helped build the city, now becomes a liability because it all fills with water. We don't have any built-in pumping capacity in the tunnel system. The electrical equipment in many cases is in the tunnel system, and now you have a serious problem, which is what we're experiencing. And we're doing a great job building out from that. But I would expect a situation like this to recur, and I think we need a systemic solution long-term, because this is really a long-term issue.
Governor, let me,
Senator?
Just one point I forgot to make, and this is an update we just got from the Army Corps about federal dewatering efforts, where the Army Corps is very good. So they're sending a whole crew from Illinois, team of experts, and contractors from around the country should be up and running in Lower Manhattan tomorrow morning. And they are going to work on the 3 priorities that the governor and mayor have set, which is the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, the Battery Park Tunnel, and the World Trade Center, in terms of getting the water out as quickly as possible. Sorry about that.
This federal dewatering team is supposed to be the best in the country. Correct. It's a unusual name, a dewatering team, but if anyone wants to know what I want for Christmas, I want my own dewatering team and 24 12-inch pumps. That's what I'm looking for.
The day after Christmas, a lot of people get
Yeah,
dewatered.
that's right. Laura? Cost works on two levels. One, the cost to government, which is, I think, the cost you're referring to. The cost for the emergency repairs, emergency services, which are very expensive, by the way. And that's why we were discussing before the storm, when do you decide to bring in emergency services, et cetera. It's a very expensive operation. The cost to government, we believe and hope and expect, and the President has suggested that FEMA will largely pay those expenses. So the state is now laying out the funds, local governments are laying out the funds. We fully expect that the federal government will pay the bulk of those expenses, 90%, possibly 100%. That's the emergency cost. There's a second cost, which is the private sector cost. We are losing revenue as governments and as a state because business is not functioning. People can't get to work, etc. That cost, there is no reimbursement for that cost. We hope to keep that at a minimum amount by getting up and running quickly. And that's one of the reasons why we want these services back up and the transportation services back up. But the private sector cost, we don't have an estimate. The governmental cost, which when all is said and done, my guess is it will be in the billions of dollars, certainly. I would just say billions at this point. We expect the federal government to pick up the lion's share of those costs, as they did with Hurricane Irene, as they normally do. Climate change is a controversial subject, right? People will debate whether or not there is climate change, whether or not it's a cycle, whether it's global warming. That's a whole political debate that I don't want to get into. I want to talk about the frequency of extreme weather situations, which is not political. The frequency of extreme weather situations is way up, right? We just went through Hurricane Irene just over a year ago. And there's only so long you can say, well, this is once in a lifetime and it will never happen again. And then it happens again. And then we say, well, this is once in a lifetime. Now, really, for sure, it's not going to happen again. And then it happens again. I joke that every 2 years we have a 100-year flood. The frequency is way up. It is not prudent to sit here, I believe, at this point and say, well, it's not going to happen again. I believe it is going to happen again. I pray that it's not. I believe that it is. And once you cross that bridge, if you will, once you have that recognition, then what are you doing about it? And what design changes, what construction changes are you making to deal with it? It is a reality that I think has becoming clearer and clearer to more and more people every day. But do I believe the nation has arrived at this as a consensus? No. Senator?
Yeah, I would just say, look, we're going to pay a price for the change in climate one of two ways. We're either going to have to just totally readapt our city. We have low-lying areas of water. Do we need levees? As the governor mentioned, the subways were never designed for water coming up and going on into them. He brought up something to us on the helicopter that he didn't realize. Even if you block the entrances, there are so many grates because of ventilation that you can't stop the water from flowing in. Or we can take the bull by the horns and deal with the issue. I don't think the federal government has done enough. I think there are a group of people in Washington right now who just deny the truth. And there is, in my judgment anyway, a relationship between all these once-in-a-lifetime storms that we experience every couple of years and what's going on in the atmosphere. And the best way to deal with that, and the least costly in the long run, is to grab the bull by the horns and actually do things that prevent the climate from changing and global warming from occurring. I'm hopeful that given all the changes in weather, it will importune at least a majority in Congress to do that. Otherwise, we're going to keep facing costs that don't do us any good, such as, the billions of dollars that this event is going to cost us, and that Irene cost us, and that Katrina cost us, and that other storms of almost certain increasing frequency will cost us.
I also think what you see in Washington, and we know that it's broken, is a poor reflection of priorities. When you have those in Washington who are arguing a cuts-only approach, cutting money for FEMA, cutting money for disaster relief, cutting money for these families that desperately need our help today, that's the wrong set of priorities. And so when we turn our attention to actually creating an energy plan for this country, we can also be mindful that we not cut some of the most vital resources we have to protecting these families when disaster does strike.
For the power, you mean? All right. I just want to be precise. Don't answer the wrong question. I'm going to leave it to Con Ed to give their prediction of when the power is back, because it's going to depend on what part of the city you're in and how you have the service and whether it's an overground service or an underground service. So, and Con Ed is doing basically updates almost by the hour. So I'll leave it to Con Ed for New York City. Westchester, it's going to depend on where you are, but my guess is it will be coming on sooner in Westchester than what I believe is going to be the worst problem in the state when it comes to power, which is going to be Long Island. You had about 90% of the customers on Long Island without power. The substations on the south side of the island have been destroyed. And the problem getting additional utility crews, because there's such a high demand for the utility crews, not just within this state, but from other states also, is compounding the problem. So I think it is days for sure in parts of Westchester and Long Island. How many days, I don't know, and I would really leave it up to the utility companies, Dave, to figure that out.
Governor, on a Long Island question, you brought up Long Island. What portion of all of the aid that the state is getting will go to Long Island? You are mentioning Long Island.
The way we are planning to do this is every local government will have its costs reimbursed by the federal government, by FEMA. So whatever Suffolk County or Westchester County or Nassau expend or have expended for this disaster, they submit to the state submits to the federal government, and we're looking for the normal reimbursement of 75%. There is an option for us to go to 90% or even 100%. I guess you won't be surprised to know I'm going to be asking for 100%, maybe 101%, but definitely 100%. And then we'll reimburse those counties. On the private economy side, then, as we said, that's wherever it is. There's no reimbursement for that.
Governor, as for Westchester, as you know, two young boys died in their own homes there. What's your priority for the county there?
Well, the priority is to keep our coordination with the county executive working well, which has been working very well. But I'll look to the county and the county executive to determine the best way the state can help, and then we deploy the resources as the county executive suggests. You know, he's on the ground there. He knows what's going on. He tells us what the priorities are, and we work together to fill them. By the way, the death toll statewide has gone up to 26 people now from the storm. So,
Governor, two questions, please. Could you share some of what went through your mind as you were looking out the shop window and some of that destruction?
It is very disturbing and sad and troubling to see the amount of damage done and the lives that have been disrupted. all across the region. And we talk about Breezy Point, which is just breathtaking to see Breezy Point or Fire Island or Long Beach. But what you also get is it's everywhere. It's everywhere, you know. And homes that have been flooded, people without power. Just being without power for a prolonged period of time is highly disruptive. And I've never seen New York like that before. I've seen other parts of the country like that. I've never seen New York like that before. And it was really disturbing. Seeing the amount of water that was coming from the Hudson and from the East River that night with no lights in downtown Manhattan 2 nights ago. That was frightening. It was frightening. It looked apocalyptic. I mean, it was to see 5 feet of water on the West Side Highway, to see that ground zero site filling with water at such a frightening volume and hoping that the tide had crested. It was frightening.
And you started this news conference with a little bit of good news regarding the commuter rails and the subway system. Can we ask Mr. Lhota for
Please.
An update on
Joe Lhota?
how you guys were able to pull that off and how quickly things will approach that?
We've been able to pull it off because of all of the great work of the men and women at Transit Authority, as well as Metro North and the Long Island Railroad, as well as the folks at Bridges and Tunnels. It's been an extraordinary amount of time and a lot of work and a lot of lack of sleep, but we're going to continue to do it. One thing, and I will post right after this, have a technical briefing for each one of the services with the presidents of each one of the operating agencies so that we can go through in great detail what is coming back today, what will be coming back tomorrow. But what I will tell you and what we're doing is we're going switch by switch, signal by signal, power substation by power substation, and making sure that everything is up and running. What we're bringing back today and tomorrow, there'll be more on Friday, and then there'll be even more on Saturday. Our goal is to every day get this service back to normal, back to the situation that we were used to last week, and if not, even better. And so that's our overriding goal, to get all of our 8.5 million customers who we have every single day back into the system as quickly as possible.
Tomorrow morning, when northern suburban commuters arrive at Grand Central, when people from the island arrive at Penn Station, will there be subway service waiting for them when they get off the commuter trains?
In some cases there will be, and I'll describe that later at the technical briefing. As the governor mentioned, we won't be able to have a subway service south of 42nd Street due to power-related problems. As soon as we have power, we will be able to do that. We will have service going north from our stations, and we'll go through that in great detail right after this, as well as have our website up and running, which will be updated at great frequency as more and more service can come back.
How much is this costing the
The cost, there's 2 levels of cost. Obviously, we're not getting our revenue coming in, which is about $18 million a day. And then at the same time, we have a full complement of all of our workers. It's all hands on deck right now on behalf of all of our customers and riders. And quite honestly, given the various different union contracts and the various different levels of overtime, I don't know the answer to that question. We'll get back to you with it.
Joe, can I follow up on what are you pumping? Are you pumping with pumper trains, or are you using pumps that are in place in these tunnels? And are you surprised at the pace of their being empty?
I'm very happy with the pace that is going on now. As the governor mentioned, we now have 3 of the 7 tunnels that we had flooded under the East River have now been cleared, and workers are going through making sure that the systems are up and running in each one of those before we bring back service. I'm very happy and keep pushing to get more and more done. In answer to your question about how we're doing it, we're using every possible resource we possibly can. The existing pumps brought in from the outside, everything we can to get the system up and running.
Now, water removal is really the greatest engineering feat that we have right now. This is why the Army Corps of Engineers, the President's offer of the unwatering or dewatering, what do we call it? Dewatering teams, which have worked at Katrina and have equipment that do just this. We were at the path tubes. Path tubes, the water is up to the platform, and we believe it goes all the way to New Jersey. So it's about 5 miles of a tunnel filled right up to the platform. So you can imagine the volume of water that has to be removed. Yeah. I don't know about the action of the Pentagon unless any of my federal friends know. In terms of the public utilities in the suburbs, let's see how they respond. They deal with a problem that is just on a practical level very difficult. The wind blows, the trees fall, the trees hit a cable, the cable is down. As a matter of fact, the wind here was blowing so strong that sometimes the cables just snapped in the wind without being hit by a limb or anything. Now, that happens every storm, you could say, and the question is, were the utilities prepared? And we'll find out by how quickly they get the power up. Now, it's been probably, from their point of view, this has been the greatest damage they've ever dealt with, just the most extreme situation they've ever dealt with. And they are stressed for utility crews, which we understand. But let's see how they perform, and then I'll tell you whether or not I think they did a good job.
Governor, can I address the...
Please.
My name's Colonel Paulo, and I'm from the Army Corps of Engineers, New York District. And I don't know about Navy ships, but I would like to say that the Navy is helping us with some specific pumping capability that they have that they use in their ships and other places. So we're going to use some of that expertise to help us with the unwatering process. So don't know about ships, but the Navy can help us with some of their pumping capabilities.
Maybe that's what you were hearing about.
Governor, you talked about climate change and the need to have a conversation about underground infrastructure in the city. In the short term, the next time one of these storms rolls around, is there anything that you would do differently to prepare, any steps to take to mitigate destruction, damage?
You know, Jacob, we're going to go through an exercise after this where we all sit down and go through a debrief and sort of lessons learned just on that level. But my main point is a fundamental rethinking of our built environment and long-term modifications that you might need to make. It is why reason I say long-term and a massive undertaking. Protecting this state from coastal flooding is a massive, massive undertaking. It has to be thought through, it has to be planned, but it is a conversation that I believe is overdue and a conversation that should begin. On the specifics, off the top of my head, though, I'll tell you this. We spent days preparing. We had the advantage of notice in this situation. And I think the preparations were all adequate. The storm was in many ways as predicted. But I can't, off the top of my head, even with the benefit of hindsight, I don't know what we could have done that we did not do.
Governor, a lot of people who were asked to evacuate by yourself and by the mayor did not evacuate. Do you think that
Well, I don't know. That is a very good question. What happens is we ask people to evacuate repeatedly. People think the weather forecast is wrong, that it's a false alarm, and they stay in their homes until they're convinced that it's not a false alarm, and now in many cases it's too late to get them out. Or now you have to put first responders in a dangerous situation to try to get them out. That's what happened in Suffolk County with Fire Island. People were told to evacuate. They didn't evacuate. They were skeptical that this was just another situation that they were being told to evacuate and then nothing would happen, which they said was like Hurricane Irene, Storm Lee. When they finally were convinced that they needed to evacuate, it was literally too late to get them out. You know, now, how do you change that? Do you have a mandatory evacuation plan? You know, that raises questions on the other side. But it is one of the compounding problems in these situations.
One more, guys. Rich, just for Mr. Lhota, we saw lines of people at the bus stop, like 100 of them at a time. What are the bus operations telling you? Are their buses completely packed? Are they able to get through all of this traffic?
Well, on any given day, we normally accommodate 2.3 million people on our buses. In addition to that, today, another 5.5 million people who normally take the subways we're trying to also accommodate on our bus service. Yes, the bus service is available. It is tight. It is packed. We'll have more information later in the day on a census number as to how many people we've accommodated. I also will work with the city to try to, we've talked a little bit this morning about dedicated lanes for the buses so that we can work with that and various other potential restrictions on car driving in the city.
I've had my personal home, we have a lot of trees down, but we had power when I left the house. But a lot of tree damage on the property. Any of my colleagues have any other points? Senator, County Exec? All right, thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.